Hi, I'm Cheryl Kagan. I'm very proud to be the senator for Rockville and Gaithersburg. And I'm delighted today to host this week's Kibbitzing with Kagan, featuring our fabulous Senate President Bill Ferguson, District 46, Baltimore City. Mr. President, thank you so much for taking the time in the holiday season, in the middle of all the craziness, to join us for a few minutes today.
Of course. Well, it is an honor to be with you and not only be here today, but to serve alongside you.
Very kind. Thank you. So you grew up in Rockville, not city limits Rockville, but just next door. Tell us something that helped guide you, frame you, and established your passion for public service.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I grew up in a family of very differentiated political beliefs. So my dad was in finance and was a CFO. My mom worked for an international labor union in DC. And so, my formative years of kind of a political consciousness were during the Clinton years, where my mom thought that Bill Clinton was the second coming. My dad thought that he was, destroying the economy. And as an only child, I was the one in the middle at dinner that would hear them, going back and forth about, the same exact set of facts, but very different perspectives. So that was I think more formative than I realized for today's work. But it also is proof, and I often will say that it's proof that people could have different political beliefs, but still love each other and raise a family.
That's fantastic.
So.
Now, when you first ran for office, you defeated an incumbent Democratic state senator. What made you take that on, and did you think you were going to win? What was your secret to victory?
What made me take it on was that I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I think it was, so I had been a teacher and had worked in the public school system in Baltimore City, which was not the path that I initially thought that I would be on. I sort of thought I would go into finance and was sort of my father's son, and went to school down in Davidson, North Carolina to, I was an econ and political science double major in it, but I thought I was going to do this sort of finance world. Until I, by mistake, sort of ended up in a Teach for America info session. And so this concept of the achievement gap was something that I, had heard theoretically, but just never really was something that I had to intimately face in any way. And had this crisis of conscience between, this idea that we live in a society where markets work and, supply meets demand and equilibrium clears the market, except for the reality that in order for those markets to work, everyone has to have access to perfect information. But if this achievement gap exists, where someone's zip code or where they're born is their biggest, it can be one of the most contributing life factors, the system doesn't work. And so I just had this fundamental breakdown of understanding of how we could have a system that relies on these basic premises, and yet we had an education system that wasn't giving everybody an equal or equitable opportunity to be successful. And so that's what really diverged my path. And I did Teach for America and came back up north and taught in Baltimore City, and then realized that the vast majority of public school work happens at the state level. And so I decided to run for office for state Senate. And I think it was that naivete that kind of, if I knew then what I know now, it would have been a much harder decision. But I think it was the kind of fearlessness of, just running on an idea.
Well, in general, there's the never look back because you have just zoomed forward from there. But let's look back for 1 second.
Yeah.
Your stories from Baltimore City schools are really powerful, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who've never heard them. Why don't you tell us one or two that really motivate, inspired, and surprised you?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so I taught in Southwest Baltimore. So at what was Southwestern High School, it no longer exists, but was one of the formerly big, enormous, comprehensive high schools in West Baltimore. And I was at an academy within it, Vivian T. Thomas Medical Arts Academy. So it was a breakout. So they had 4 different schools in one building with 4 different uniforms. It was kind of chaos, different schedules, different rules. It was quite an experience. But I sort of got there excited, ready to go. I was going to have this huge immediate impact. And very quickly, I realized that what I thought I was walking into was very different than the reality of what I could have ever expected. And, I don't think any teacher, no matter the level of preparation, that first day when you are a teacher of record, it is a very different experience. But in this case, and I often will tell this story because I think it was really symbolic and it's just on the facility side, but I was given a classroom on the second floor, was given the keys and said, go ahead up. This is your, Mr. Ferguson, here's your classroom. And I go up with my keys and I get to the classroom and the door is shut with no doorknob. And so I had the keys with no doorknob. And so I walked back down and said, well, thanks for the keys, but I can't get in. I don't have a doorknob. I'm like, oh, well, just see if you can jiggle it and find a way in. And so I thought like, oh, of course, well, it'll just get replaced. Maybe it's a summer thing. And when a couple weeks later, still didn't have a doorknob, asked, and they said, well, we've already used up all our facilities budget. You're just gonna have to deal with it. So I spent the entire year teaching in a classroom that didn't have a doorknob. And I would carry around a pair of scissors in my pocket where I would pull out a pair of scissors and literally break out like a criminal out of my classroom. So, it was 14, 15, 16-year-old kids when they had to go to the bathroom in the middle of a lesson, I would have to pull out my scissors and literally break out. And it just was this very tangible example of, we've got to be better than this. Like, this just can't be who we are. This was 30 miles away from where I grew up in Montgomery County. And I just had no level of the scope of challenges that were put in the way for too many young people. And it just made me believe passionately that we've got to be better than this.
So we will come back to public education in a few minutes, but let's talk about coming to the Senate as a bit of a giant killer and the youngest senator. What was that like? How were you treated? What was your biggest surprise?
There was a lot that I was very fortunate. Delegate Sandy Rosenberg was my legislative law professor. So I was going to law school at night and went to University of Maryland Law, and Delegate Rosenberg, now our colleague and then delegate, was my legislative law, and we had to do bill drafting. And, he sort of talked about rules of Annapolis and kind of this way. And I learned I feel very grateful having taken that class. But I came to Annapolis thinking, well, the best ideas surely are the ones that get passed. If there's data and
that's
reports,
so cute. That's adorable.
Of course, if you just have a good argument to make,
right,
that's what's going to pass.
Yeah.
And I realized very, very quickly that may open the door, but that it really is any legislature is premised on the relationships between colleagues to move the work. Right. So you can have a great idea, but if you don't have the coalition, if you don't do the work, if you don't build the relationships, if you don't make the case more broadly, things won't see the light of day. So
very quick story. My first year in the House in committee, teeny tiny baby bill, perfectly innocuous, perfectly fine bill. And the chairman was very clear that we were killing the bill because it had a sponsor problem.
That's how it is. But, I think people from the outside sort of see that as like, oh, this is such a problem. At the end of the day, the legislature is a reflection of the people of Maryland. And relationships, the whole art of legislating is finding ways to reflect the people of Maryland's desires about how we agree to live together. And so, the personal relationships and the experience that's built off of those relationships, it is more than just well, I like this person or don't like this person. It is, I think our colleagues all have passions and desires, and you start to get a sense of what people care about and what they're working on. And so, I think I know we both have, you learn so much as a part of in it that's hard to explain from the outside. But we're always ever and bending the arc towards justice. It's a gradual, never finished project.
That's true. So you started off on the committee on which I serve, Education, Health, Environmental Affairs, and then went to Budget and Taxation and had the global experience of overseeing the state budget, as I did on my 4 years on appropriations. What did you learn that surprised you about the state budget?
Well, so state budget is just, how expansive. You see the numbers, you see the departments, but when you're on a subcommittee getting the briefings of all of and you're just on 1/3 of the budget, it just becomes so clear how expansive our state government is and in how many lives are being impacted by the decisions that get made. And so, it's easy to just see the numbers and think about budget deficits, but at the end of the day, the budget represents our values as the people of Maryland and what we put our money towards and what we care about. And so, the committees run very different. I would say that's one of my biggest takeaways is that's what I love about Annapolis as well, is that, there are these micro cultures that exist. And I always joke that with EHE, it the issues are so broad. I mean, you could go from who has the license to run a furrier shop to, the regulation of major healthcare markets. And those could be bills back to back. And it's a lot more free flowing and issues are coming from all over the place. Whereas in budget and tax, it's very formulaic, it's very structured. It's like, it's sort of got like a well-heeled law firm feel, you speak at this time, you don't speak at this. So, on EHE, you could have an immediate impact. You are voting on bills that you can immediately put in an amendment to move it. It's a really powerful committee to really make change quickly. Budget and tax, everything is much more process driven. And so, the committee structures really have an impact on the outcomes.
Agreed. And just for those who don't know the acronym, EHE or EHE is Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs. In addition to those three, we also have oversight over election law, procurement, alcohol bills, health occupation, and just many more issues. It's a really exciting, and as the president indicated, very diverse jurisdiction that we have. So then Senate President Mike Miller, the longest serving president in the nation's history, announced that he would be stepping down as president of the Senate after 33 years, just truly heroic. And there was a contentious field of candidates with very different offerings and stuff. Talk me through the process of deciding to become a candidate and what made you think that you were the right person to step in.
So it certainly was not an initial feeling. I can reiterate that point that I think our chamber has a very unique place in the legislature overall, and I think we are. It is a special place where we are able to solve problems, and I think we had relied on having the same leadership for 33 years, and so the institution. I still go back to this point that there was not a single person in the chamber at the time of Senator Miller stepping down that had been in the Senate with anyone other than Mike Miller as Senate President, which is just a remarkable fact, I think, when you step back and think about that. So, this was going to be a major transition, and from the outset, I thought, if it's going to be such a shock to the system, it would be excellent if we could solve problems like we do in the Senate, where we figure out a coalition, there's rallying around somebody, and we make a unanimous decision. Right. And so, I thought there were a number of excellent colleagues, candidates in the field, and partway through the process, it sort of became more clear that there wasn't one person that was going to really take it. Take the votes and win with an overwhelming majority. And I always sort of thought it would be great if we could pass with 24 votes so that it was, a real showing of support. And when I realized that wasn't the case, I'd gotten a call from Senator Dolores Kelly, who suggested kind of late in the summer, if Mike does end up stepping down, I think you should put your hat in the ring. And my immediate reaction was, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm humbled and honored, but no, thank you. Right. And she called back a couple weeks later, and I went to her house and we had a long conversation, and then traveled around and met with you and others, and each of us one-on-one, to just kind of hear where people were. And it looked like there was a potential opportunity to unify the Senate, and things seemingly worked out.
Yep, definitely. So I have to tell you, since there were only 32 votes, it just felt like one of the biggest responsibilities and the most important decisions that I had to make in the Senate, because it really was going to be the future of the Senate and the future of the state of Maryland. And so I think we all took it pretty seriously, and I was so proud to support you and so grateful for the work that you've done.
And I was so proud to have your support. And honestly, and I think, in any election, the smaller number of votes needed to win, the more personal it is. Yeah. And when you have 32 that these are colleagues and friends, and it's very different than running, for a district or a statewide. It was a very intimate process that I learned so much about myself, most importantly, about each one of my colleagues, that I cherish having had the opportunity, and
Yeah.
it's an honor to be able to serve and do this work.
So talk about becoming president. Talk about having Mike Miller still in the chamber. What were the biggest challenges last session? So you had what ultimately will end up having been one session or 3/4 of a session of overlap. What was the hardest thing about following in his footsteps?
Well, I would say, so something that Mike would always say from the DSL and in meetings, that he could always see the future, right? That was he was a historian. What happens in the past happens in the future, or it happens in the present. And so, I keep joking that it wasn't cancer that really took. Mike could see the future and knew that a pandemic was coming. And so he thought, let's just hand this over to the next person because this is going to be crazy. But this has been an unbelievable year. Coming into the session, it's obviously an intimidating moment, and incredibly, I felt honored to be able to do it. And you want to really represent this body as well as possible. And so very quickly, I started to feel the enormity of the role that is the institution and the institutional impact that we have that I hadn't really felt as acutely. And so there was an added sense of responsibility. I mean, there's all of the other pieces, logistics and administrative, that was way more than I ever realized, just way more. But happens behind the scenes. I would say that's actually been one of the biggest takeaways, is that, for 10 years I served in the Senate and knew that bills showed up and knew that amendments showed up and knew that it was being drafted or that an amendment was being added on, but I never really processed the process. Mm-hmm. And that has been it is unbelievable how much happens just on a regular basis in order for us to function, sure. That I have such a different appreciation for.
That's great.
And but all of that kind of hits right away. And then I think there was a lot of suggestions, or people thought that having Senator Miller in the chamber would be problematic. It would sort of be kind of the two popes situation. And really, it could not have been further from the case. From the very, very, very beginning, I am so unbelievably grateful that I was able to serve with Senator Miller. The advice, I was able to just complain about things that he understood, and just the kind of overarching, how do I deal with this question? What about this meeting? Is this a meeting that you would have taken? It just was unbelievably helpful. And I am so grateful having had the opportunity to serve alongside him in this capacity. Right. So it was certainly, that first month was tough, and we had a lot of big issues with the Kerwin Commission and HBCUs and Preakness and
everything,
you name it.
Yeah.
So it was a hard year last year, and then the pandemic.
So before we move on to the Kerwin Commission, President Emeritus Mike Miller did just recently announce that he would be not only now stepping down as president, but he was resigning from the Senate. And I just want to give you a moment to just say a quick word about that, because his leadership has left such an enormous legacy for our state, and he is truly to be honored for his public service, he and his family.
Without a doubt. 50 years of public service to the state of Maryland is something that is truly remarkable. And doing it as the longest serving Senate president, that doesn't happen by accident. That takes a level of legislative skill, personal relationship development, understanding of the state that is truly unmatched. And there were many times where Senator Miller and I disagreed on a policy issue but always I knew that I could go in and at least make my case, and that there would be a listening ear. And if we ended up on the opposite sides, at least I had the opportunity to make the case, which I think is something I've really, really appreciated. And just a steadfast, he would say it, but I feel it even more now, this sense of protect the institution. The institution really matters, and it is only as good as the people trust it. And it is something that I think for generations, there will be a model of public service that I think Senator Miller has represented and will represent in the years ahead. And so,
amen.
It was a tough decision for him, I know, but I think it's worth celebrating the positive impact he's had over these many, many years.
I agree. So let's go back to the Kerwin Commission, and we are all so committed to public education, and all the challenges have been exacerbated during the coronavirus, as the achievement gap has and grown into a chasm in funding and computer equipment and all that just has been revealed as a huge challenge. So the Kerwin Commission, the blueprint for Maryland's future, a 10-year plan, Governor Hogan vetoed it. Before I stop talking and give it to you, you said from the very beginning that you wanted it to pass with bipartisan support, and you were able to accomplish that. And that was pretty remarkable. And despite that, the Republican governor did veto the bill. And now here we are with a pandemic and fiscal challenges. Talk, if you would, about public education, what we did and what you envision going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think of all of our state responsibilities, it's no mistake that providing for a free and appropriate public education for all children in the state of Maryland is part of our Constitution. Fundamental to the ongoing stability of civilization is the quality of public education.
Right.
If we do not provide for an educated populace, all the rest doesn't matter. And so it is a bedrock foundation of state government that we provide what should be a world-class education to every student. What we did over the last 3 years leading up was one of the most comprehensive studies of America's public education system that has ever been done, probably by any state in the nation, and looked not only at what Maryland was doing, our competitor states were doing, but what globally was being done to make sure that our system was competitive. And what we found were enormous gaps. We have some amazing schools, amazing schools where kids are getting incredible opportunities. The challenge is that it's not universal. And those gaps and those missed opportunities can't be changed overnight. They were going to take a while to move towards, but we know what to do. We know what it takes. And so what the blueprint represents is that 10-year game plan to say every child deserves a world-class education. We know how to get there, and this is the roadmap over the next 10 years to get it done. That's not a Republican issue. It's not a Democratic issue. It's not a libertarian issue. It is just an issue about our civilization and our economic prosperity. It is fundamental. And that's why going into the blueprint debate, knowing that there was some potential partisan divisions that could happen, it was really important for me personally, but I believe for the Senate overall, to move forward with this plan, showing that it wasn't about Republicans and Democrats. It was about Maryland's families and young children having the ability to maximize their potential. And I know that our Republican friends believe the same thing. And so finding a way to get us all there, I think it's no mistake that we had the minority leader at the time and now the incoming minority whip both voted in favor of this bill. And so it's a signal that education is not partisan. Education is our future. And so it's, as we look at this upcoming session, it's not only as important, it is ever more important this year than ever that we get this right, because what we've seen happen over the last 10 months, we have upwards of maybe, we don't know for sure, 100,000 children of the 900,000 children in Maryland's public schools who have not had a regular academic experience since March of this year. Mm-hmm. That's something as a society we have never had to deal with. Right. And so what we see on the back end of this pandemic, which thankfully there is a light at the end of the tunnel, is we have some unbelievably important work to do just to catch up to where we were, which we know was already behind. Right. And so it's more important now than ever that we have a roadmap for the future.
Great. You just referenced new Republican leadership. Speak super briefly, if you would. The Republican minority leader, minority whip have both been replaced with new folks. Expectations of bipartisanship?
Look, I certainly hope so. I think the Senate is a very different place where we find a way to find our common interests and work through products to make sure that they benefit the most number of Marylanders. And so that is going to be the objective moving forward. I really had an excellent relationship with the prior minority leader and minority whip, who continue to serve and decided not to run again for leadership, which I certainly respect their decision to do so. But we had a really great working relationship. Senator Jennings and I served on NEHE together in our very first term, and we have kids similar ages. And so, we certainly knew what each other, where the red lines were. I have an excellent relationship with the incoming folks as well. It'll be different, but I think we're still the same Senate of Maryland that we've been, and we've been able to pass through a transition with Senate President Emeritus Miller. I think we will be as successful passing through in a transition with the new leadership.
Good. I have two quick questions and then we'll get to our fast five and wrap up and let you go back to everything else that you've got on your plate for today. First off, we are coming back into session in person and with precautions. What's your biggest hope, your biggest fear, expectations, anything you want folks to know about?
Yeah, so it'll be a very, very different session. The whole idea of legislating is convening to write laws. That is certainly not a recommended strategy in a pandemic. And so from the beginning, it's how do we make sure that we can perform our essential function with the least risk possible? Because as one of three branches of government, we are an essential component to the continuity of government, no matter the emergency.
Right.
And so we've learned, every senator has been working unbelievably hard throughout this interim. I mean, harder than I think anyone ever imagined was feasible, just because the need is so great right now. But it is essential that we be able to do this work come January. We're going to be adopting new rules, new protocols. And so I think there's been a lot of conversation about how access is limited. I think there's another side of the story that because of the changes that we're making, we actually will be more transparent and accessible from a virtual fashion than we've ever been in the history of the operation of the Maryland Senate. So for the first time ever, members, somebody in Western Maryland or on the Eastern Shore doesn't have to trudge 3 hours to come to Annapolis to testify on their interests. They'll be able to sign up and testify from the comfort of their home.
Right.
So I think there are some really important lessons to be learned that are the positive side of this that we'll be certainly trying to account for moving forward.
Good, good. So you referenced your kids. A lot of times people ask women about how they manage a work-life balance. You're a young father and a husband, as well as an employee, consultant, Senate president, and a senator for your constituents. How do you balance it all and stay sane and healthy?
Day by day, day by day. Look, it's not easy, especially this year. This year has been really hard. And I think it's important to say that because, there are a lot of times where you'll see some of these sort of messages that, oh, you just find a way to make it work. It's hard. It's really, really hard. And it requires being really intentional. And I will say one of the things that is it's hard to find silver linings in a pandemic, but if forced to pull some, it did slow me down in the sense of being at home way more than I certainly would have been absent a pandemic, which also made me realize how important it was to spend time at home with my kids, with my wife, and be present for them. So, it is certainly going to inform what life looks like on the other side of this, because there's nothing to replace being present. And but it is a challenge, and there are competing priorities at every given moment of the day. And so it's about just really blocking out and trying to make sure that I'm being intentional about how my time is being used.
Perfect. Thank you. So, fast five. Senate President Bill Ferguson. I should give credit to my interns and my staff who helped me brainstorm special ones for you.
Oh, wonderful.
So first question, what is your favorite place in Baltimore to go with your family that you would recommend to others?
This is an easy one. Patterson Park. We live in the neighborhood of Patterson Park. Patterson Park is one of the greatest public spaces, I would say, in the world. I'm slightly biased, but I just think it represents all that is good about cities, that it brings people from all different backgrounds and cultures and income levels together for mutual enjoyment. So Patterson Park.
Super. Question two, if you could do any job in the world for one day, what would you choose?
I feel so lucky to be able to do this job. If it were I don't know. What job would I do? I'd be an astronaut, maybe. That'd be pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. If you had a magic wand and could change any one thing in the state of Maryland, what would you do?
I would I would find a way to create an incredibly effective system of voluntarily socioeconomically diverse public schools. It's really hard, but creating that socioeconomic diversity is so fundamental to creating opportunities for all. So that would be my magic wand.
Love that. What is your guilty pleasure?
Survivor.
Okay.
reality television kind of generally. So the competition bit, Survivor, Big Brother, that is my very guilty pleasure.
But were you ever into The Voice?
I wasn't, so I don't, the skill competitions are less, I like the like human competition, insights into humanity shows.
Cool. One of the winners one season was a Vassar grad.
Really?
Ethan Zone. Yeah.
Good.
So people who think it's still a women's school, we had a good looking, like macho guy who won.
Oh, right.
That was cool. So the fifth question, the one that I ask everyone, Mr. President, what is your hidden superpower? What is a skill that you have, something you're really good at that most people can't do?
Ooh. You have asked this, and I knew it was coming, and now I'm drawing a blank on it. I think, oh gosh, this is hard. This is hard because it feels so, I'm not, I think I really try to see the value in every person. Then no matter who they are, there's something to be learned from everyone. Even the most odious of individual, there's some lesson that can be learned. And so I think that's something that's really helped me to learn about the world and myself in ways that help me to navigate.
I love that. Well, as we prepare to reconvene, as we prepare to kick off the new year and welcome a new administration with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, that's a great message. So, Senate President Bill Ferguson, thank you again for taking the time. Thank you for your leadership, your service, your friendship, and here's to getting it done in 2021.
Thank you. We're going to do great work in the 2021, the year of recovery.
Here we go. Indeed. Stay safe. All the best.
Yes, thank you. Take care.
Take care.